You can see me, right? I see you. I think I see you. Yeah.
Yep.
Oh, wow. Talk about...
I'm going to mute us. Welcome everybody to the stream. Hope you're doing well. Using slightly different software, so hopefully everything works out. We had a little bit of technical difficulties, but got it worked out. And for those of you who don't know, this is a Q&A night normally for just about anything you want to talk about, camera, drones, lenses, all of that. Tonight we're going to focus mostly on the DJI FPV drone because that was just released. And on that note, Aldrin Estacio, who runs the channel Flight Path, who I'm sure if you've been involved with drones at all, you probably know who he is, has graciously accepted my invitation to join us as a guest tonight. So I'm going to bring him in and we're going to say hello to Aldrin.
Whoa, yo. What's going on, Jake? How's everyone doing? What is happening?
How's it going, Aldrin?
Good. After that, trying to figure out some audio stuff here, but yeah, good. We're good now.
I know it's like never fails. No matter how time you do something and test something, it's like when it needs to happen. There's always some point where you're like, I don't understand why this isn't working. It works any other time I try it, and now it's not. How's the weather down there?
You know, literally an hour ago, it was hailing. So I don't know what it is. We had 70 degrees the other day, then it's hailing today, and tomorrow I guess it's cloudy. So yeah, we're getting a little bit of everything. It was I think last week was just beautiful. So can't really complain. Nice. Water the plants. We're good.
we're getting dumped. I think we're supposed to get like 7 inches of snow between starting an hour ago through tonight or something like that. So like perfect. Great time to go out and not test a drone.
Yeah, exactly. There was some stuff on the agenda today. I was like, okay, got my work done, and then I'm like, oh no, that's not gonna work unless I'm doing something waterproof. But
right,
work out.
That's what I did find out. This is not terribly waterproof. The one time I landed in manual mode and it flipped over, it got some snow into the ESC somehow, and I had to dry it out pretty well before I could fly it again because it kept telling me there was an ESC issue. But once it dried out again, it was good to go. So I was happy to see that because got me a little worried there.
Yeah. I think the only time I had to deal with weather was when I flew it in Tahoe. I don't know how I don't know about you, but I definitely felt, I think it was an altitude difference flying it, you know. Of course I'm over here at sea level. So when I went to Tahoe, there was definitely an altitude change, and I did feel a lot of characteristic change on the drone. So that was something I wasn't expecting just yet. I'm assuming it was altitude. That's the only thing I could really put together.
Yeah, I think it. I mean, I'm barely above sea level where I am too, and most of the mountains I go to are like 4,000 to 6,000 foot high. So I don't consider those high mountains. Yeah. I mean, they're mountains, but they're not giant mountains like you would find in Tahoe or Colorado or something like that. So,
yeah, I don't know what I was at. I was probably around that, maybe like 6,000 to 7,000. So
yeah. I know it seems like once you get over 3,000 to 4,000, that's when you can really tell there's a shift in performance. I notice with this, I have to put on more aggressive props once I go over about 3,000, or it doesn't work the same. And I know a few other people have said that too. And yeah, so the DJI FPV drone. I know you've done a bunch of videos about it. I got one battery worth of flights in and was able to put together a video about it, but I'm curious now that, I mean, you've obviously had it for longer than I have, but what are your thoughts on the drone overall and who you think it's for?
Yeah. And if you guys, if anyone hasn't seen my video, I basically did a review on this and just my experience. Of course, I'm coming from, the standard Phantom Mavic background. So for me, I'm more of a photographer first, videographer second, and then this kind of just continues, I would say. It kind of goes along with everything, kind of like the next step type of thing. So it's very, it was all new, right? I mean, like I said before, I've flown a couple of my friends' stuff, but never to the point where it's like it's yours, right? And
right,
when you fly your friend's stuff, it's it's really tuned for how they fly, and I wasn't used to any of that stuff. So of course, getting into it, I just took it as it was. It was very, let me start off in normal mode, let me get into sport mode. I'm like, okay, and now I'm starting to feel the difference, and I think that's the biggest change. I think a lot of people that haven't flown before, for me, and it was a straight, genuine, vlog style comment after it. I was like, after you fly with the goggles, I mean, it's a completely, especially with the HD goggles. I've flown before with analog, but I mean, now you're literally just watching like, your screen that you normally look at your phone, but in your face, flying at a couple thousand feet away, and it's crystal clear. And it's like, I think people don't really get that. You don't really get that, or you don't understand that feeling until you've actually put them on. Even experienced FPV pilots, and when they put on the HD goggles from DJI, they're like, "Whoa, all right, now it's a new game," So
yeah,
it was completely new, and it just kind of like, what are the possibilities? What can we do with it? And that was the excitement part. That was the exciting part about it.
That's what because I got into FPV a couple years ago. And the whole reason I got into it was I wanted to be able to get those kind of feel like you're flying through, in my case, glaciers, and mountain valley stuff. And I just wasn't able to get it with the normal GPS drones, of Mavics or Phantoms or Inspire, whatever have you. They all have their place, and I mean, they're still great tools, but I was really wanting to get some more, what's the word? Energetic and high motion, high energy shots. And so I started jumping on FPV, and so I mean, now after doing it for a few years, after banging my head against a brick wall for a while, trying to figure out how to set them up, how to program them, how to tune them, and then going through a lot of crashes and quickly learning how to fix them and build them. It's interesting coming at this, especially when the initial reviews, a lot of the initial reviews that came from people who have an FPV background who have been involved with FPV already. Mm-hmm. It feels like the initial reviews were, I don't want to say negative, but they weren't like overwhelmingly positive. It was more like, oh, it doesn't do this, it doesn't do that, it is missing this and this and this, and that's why it's not a great drone. But to me, when I looked at it, especially when I was starting to put together my thoughts for the video about it, it really struck me like, this is really not meant for people who already fly FPV. It's meant for people who want to, but haven't taken the step yet.
Yeah. And I think it's not even just flying FPV, like in general terms, right? I mean, I guess people lump the whole term FPV as like, it's everything, it's racing, it's cinematic. I mean, like, each one of like those categories, it lives on its own, right? Yeah. It's just like saying a photographer's a photographer. You're like, no, not really. I mean, there's wedding photographers, there's lifestyle photographers. You just can't say because you get a camera, you should be able to shoot everything, right? So I think that's what people get too caught up on the word FPV in a way, and it's like, oh, it's not an FPV. It's not. I mean, in layman terms, it's you're seeing the first person view. You're seeing it through a goggles. In short, that's what it is, right? But what it can do, what you can do within it, I think that's where there's so many categories. So I don't blame them for being upset or being having an opinion about it, because like their expectation is definitely in a way set at a different bar when you want to get into it, just like anyone else would. And it's there's no right or wrong, right? It's just everyone's coming in it at a different angle, a different experience level, and coming from a different background. So, you have a lot of people that have photography backgrounds like myself or videography backgrounds, but it's completely new. So, of course, my opinion is going to be 100 times different than someone that's been building for 2 years saying, "Oh no, this is not. It's a shortcut to way." Absolutely, and it's. But I think it's one of those things you just have to try it, experience it, and then see where it fits in your toolkit, right? There's no one camera. There's no one thing. I'm going to bring this around for the sheer joy of flying it, but I'm also going to bring my Mavic Air or my Mavic 2 Pro, right? Because I do a lot of prints. I do a lot of photography. I do a lot of large scale prints. I'm not going to print this, right? Of course. But I would like to go to Alaska, fly my Mavic 2 Pro, some panoramics, right? So I'll do some panoramics with Mavic 2 Pro, and then let's go mess around on with that and try to get something different. And without the knowledge of having to build anything, I'm just going to pull it out and try to get something that's different than what I normally get. And I think that's kind of where it's at, right?
Yeah.
That for me, at least, that's kind of how I look at it.
Yeah, I think I think that's a good way to look at it. And that's kind of the way, once I started messing with it, that's what really shifted in my mindset of going like, okay, like these, I use these a lot in commercial work, and I use my big one a lot in commercial work now that that's starting to get to be a thing. And I use the little tiny ones that you can fly inside, the little Cine Whoops with a GoPro that's been stripped down to just the circuit board, because they're really great for indoor stuff. But when I started messing with this, the feed to the goggles is so much better than the feed to the goggles through this, which this is the DJI FPV system.
That's what I keep hearing. Yeah, I keep hearing that too.
And the only thing I can think of is that they're taking the 4K camera feed and crunching it down to, whatever, 810p or 720p to the goggles. And it's the same as like filming in 4K, but then you upload something in 1080. It still looks better if you filmed it in 4K. It has more detail. It's just a little cleaner and sharper. And that's exactly what I was like, crap, this drone is going to have to go with me places now, because it is so much fun to fly. And you can be so confident knowing, I have GPS rescue set up on this, and every time I've tested it, it does work, but it's not the same as this, where it's going to come back and land within an inch or two of wherever it took off. Especially when I took it out, the one day I've been able to fly it so far before we started getting dumped on again, flying up the glacier, I was just like, because that glacier has eaten several drones of mine. And one of them I got back, a couple of more in there, and I'll probably never get them back. They'll be frozen in there for archaeologists to find in 100 years. But being able to fly with this and just be like, if, so long as I don't crash it into the ground, if anything happens, it's going to come back. And at first, when I saw DJI's promotional stuff, I was like, oh yeah, the joy of flying, blah, blah, blah. It sounds really gimmicky. But after flying it, I was like, oh, they're not wrong. It is like, you can sit there with the goggles, and especially when you kind of start to get the feel of the manual mode, it is like flying, because the view in the goggles is so spectacular, and then the flight time is so good. Like it really just goes and goes.
Yeah, I mean, you think about that. Speaking of flight time, I mean, you think about flying in general. You always want to pad yourself, a few minutes. And it's, it's interesting to hear, the FPV pilots in general are only like, well, I only get 4 minutes. How do I, you can't pad the time. Where here it's like, oh, I got 4 minutes left. All right, maybe I'll bring it back,
Right.
So I think that's, and I think, like you mentioned, the joy of it was super new. I think that's what it was. Like I said, I played with some analog stuff before. It's cool. And, a lot of people will just say, well, if you want to get into it, just fly like, fly analog. And it's hard to tell people that after flying a DJI product, though. It's like you're telling somebody to go watch black and white static TV after watching 4K, and say you should learn how to watch TV on a 1920 TV. It's like, it's hard. I mean, and the expectation with DJI is why if I can get an HD screen, that's kind of what I'm used to. I think it was just a natural progression. Like I said, I think that's kind of what it is.
Yeah, I agree. So I know somebody asked about the cost, and it's $1,300 plus. Thank God my extra batteries finally got here. Plus $300 for a few more batteries. But in the reality, like when I started down this path, this is $450 worth of stuff on here. And then you buy a controller, which is gonna be another couple $100, and then to buy goggles, whether you're getting the DJI FPV goggles or some high-end analog goggles, realistically, you're not that far off from $1,300 by the time you go in. You can do it cheaper for sure, but the other
for sure.
If you jump into FPV, it's a rabbit hole. Especially the more you do it, the more you enjoy it. I mean, I guess drones are kind of a rabbit hole in general, but you go, I'm just going to get one, and then you end up with 3 or 4, and you're like, oh yeah, the whole one thing didn't really work out. But I think like $1,300, because somebody asked about that, it's not that far off considering the quality of what you get out of the drone.
I think that's what everyone says. Once you add up, if you're just to do the goggles and the HD transmission in general, you're already at like whatever $800 or $900.
Yeah.
Or, so I mean, yeah, I understand it. There's budget ways. I mean, Beta FPV just sent me one for the starter kit for $200. I know that.
Right.
I've flown those before. I've flown not Beta FPVs, but I've flown the small ones that you fly around the house, and you can break those all day and kind of repair those, not a problem. But I think it's just but what you get for it. I mean, if you're willing to fly through the trees, then I mean, at that point, you're kind of willing to know you're going to lose. And that goes for everything, right? The Mavic Mini. I mean, you can fly those things through trees as well, but at the end of the day, you're going to take that risk. I mean, yeah, it's probably a little bit bulkier and beefier than the minis, ideally, to take a more of a beating. But everything's going to break, right? Everything will break. So. Yeah, you take that risk. I mean, even flying the glaciers. I mean, at some point you're going to push that limit, right? And ideally, you're going to be like, man, I wish it was. I didn't break the arm, but I mean, you kind of push it, so it's going to happen.
So on that note, a few people have asked if you've wrecked it, and if I've wrecked it.
In the video, I did crash it, so I did break. I cracked the arm. So, and this is the same one. And I literally took the arm off, and luckily I didn't see anything broke in it. I think, see the light still broke right here. This back arm is cracked. It didn't break off like I've seen some of the guys that have like hit trees and like literally it's dangling. So no, I have 2 cracks on the body right here on both sides, and I put some sealant on it for now. I did take off the screws. I did pull it out, try to just tighten everything up. And I flew it again, and it flew fine. So in a way right now, since it still flies, I'm going to keep flying this one until I break this one, probably, since it's already kind of damaged. So I'm like, all right, if I'm going to take a risk on it, I'm going to fly this one now because it already has some, it already has some wear and tear on it.
Yeah, some battle damage.
Yeah.
That's what I haven't. Well, I mean, I don't know if you'd say I crashed it, but I came into land in manual mode, and nothing I land on is like flat and level. And so as I came down, it was on a pretty good slope, and the drone flipped over, and I had to blow and get a bunch of snow out because it all got crammed up in there. And other than the props getting scuffed up and the canopy getting scuffed up, and then I had to wait for the snow to make sure it was all dried out inside. It hasn't had a problem. But I would say, like, for those of you that are wondering how durable it's going to be, it's not going to be as durable as this. Like, I've crashed it 6-7 times from 300 or 400 feet up, and it's dropped like a rock into the ground. It's cartwheeled and stuff like that, and it's definitely had damage. And I've had to rebuild motors and replace parts, so it's not like it just jumped up in the air again. This drone's not going to handle a crash quite the same as that. That's why you have DJI Care Refresh.
Yeah.
and stuff
and I do see them possibly, coming out with, a smaller version. I mean, I think at the end of the day, it's like, this is that, the same way that they transitioned traditional FPV pilots into this.
Yeah.
This is like the drone version of the goggles, right? So they're transitioning people like myself over just to taste it, and then it just opens the door of like what could be next. I think that's what's really fun about it, right? I think what could be next, maybe they do make a carbon fiber body that can really take a beating, that's made for the threading the needle and doing all the complete full acro stuff that a lot of people have been doing. Maybe, who knows, right? It's not like they can't do any of that stuff. It's just a matter of them making a body that's 5 times, 10 times stronger.
Yeah. And I think, looking at the DJI website and other like drone repair shop websites, I see where parts are going to be available for it.
Yeah.
So that, like in my case, because I've already built my own drones, I would have no problem going through and replacing an ESC on this if I could get the ESC part or a motor or whatever. But yeah, it'll be, I'm curious to see kind of the ecosystem that develops around this as time moves on. Cause just like these, all of a sudden now there's a bunch of aftermarket antennas that you can get, and an analog module that'll attach to the side and stuff. I'm sure the same stuff's going to happen to this. And Maybe we'll get a little canopy with a shark fin back here or something.
The only thing that's that'd be kind of cool. The only thing that's going to be difficult for anybody, they can fix the arms and stuff, but once you take off the shell, and you'll see it once you take yours off, if you do. I mean, the components in there are so tight, and there's so much involved, of course, because of all of the other features that the DJI drone has, right? So they're cramming all the other stuff in there. So even though if it takes a bit hard enough crash in general, it's going to be tricky because I feel like there could be other things. You don't know if there's other things that are going to be the issue, not just an arm or a motor. I mean, you're lucky if that's the only case, but yeah, there's so much packed in this thing. I'm curious. I wonder if they would make a stripped down version that's really just the bare bones type of drone, right? So you're not dealing with all the other stuff. Maybe, who knows?
It'd be interesting. Either way, I'm excited about it because I think it's going to move FPV forward as a whole. Just some of the features that are on this and the things that they've done. I think now other manufacturers of FPV equipment are going to take a look at it and go, if we could implement something similar or do something similar. I mean, the whole idea of being able to adjust the camera in flight to change your angle is really cool. And then however they figured out to make it so that you can see the exact degrees that you're pitching the camera. But for those of you that don't know and you haven't seen, like, the battery in the FPV drone comes all the way up basically to right here. And pretty much the only thing on this that's electronics is between this little section here with the ESC in the back and then the camera module here. Everything else is pretty much just space to hold the battery. They did a good job of engineering this thing. It's a lot of stuff packed into a small space.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, I mean, as I said, when you take out, if you haven't taken off the cover yet, take it off. It's in some of my videos, but holy cow. Just how they are able to pack everything in there is, that engineering is ridiculous on this thing. Yeah,
it is. So I know somebody asked, is it hard to hand catch? Have you tried hand catching yours?
I think I've only hand catched it.
Oh, really?
Yeah, it's actually super, super easy because of the fact that you have this back part.
Right. That's a huge thing to grab.
It's literally giving you a handle. So,
right.
I mean, if it's windy, no, I will not hand catch it. But if it's not windy at all, this thing's actually, just don't try to hand catch it in manual mode.
Yeah.
Throw it into normal mode, let it hover just like any other Mavic. It'll sit there in place, stick your hand underneath it, let the sensors sense you, and then just keep holding that left stick down. And I mean, it's there for you to grab. But don't do it, of course, if this is your first drone. I mean, we've been flying for a little bit, so hand catching is not that big of a deal. But yeah, if it's windy, no, I'm not going to do it. I'll land it. But hand catching it, I don't hand launch it though. So that's one thing I don't do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I haven't tried hand launching or hand catching yet, but I mean, looking at this size and just the fact, like, I know guys that hand catch and hand launch these, which there's just no way I would try that. At least not yet. Maybe someday, but no. But the fact that this can come back and you can flip it in normal mode and it just stops and hovers like a Mavic is really nice.
The one reason
you don't want
to, sorry, go Jay.
I was going to say, you pull your goggles off and then you can, maneuver it wherever you want, land it exactly where you want. Whereas this, like, anytime I land this, I'm pretty much guessing because I've got a kind of high up tilt on my camera. I'm like, I'll come in and then just cut the throttle, disarm it, and and hope that I'm dropping it like on my backpack or on my landing pad or something because, I'm surrounded by snow and water most of the time.
Yeah, and the main reason why I don't hand launch this thing is because if you actually launch it and you don't give it enough throttle, it's back heavy. So when you go up, if you're just throttling up, nice and slow, it'll lean back, right? It'll go like this first, and then it kind of levels out. So of course, I'm not going to try to unless I hand launch it already angled out like this. But other than that, no, I would normally always just put it on the ground and launch it because when like I said, when you do launch it, it kind of leans up first and then it goes up. So. But yeah, hand catching is pretty easy.
it's pretty nice.
You got this big battery to grab. It kind of reminds me of like when if you ever try to hand catch an Inspire, which is actually super dangerous, but the Inspire would just sit low, right? That battery is just
especially the arms are up, like everything's just hanging down.
Just hanging down. So that's kind of like this too. You just kind of just let this thing sit in your palm and then keep that left joystick or left stick down and it'll shut off. But yeah, don't do it if you don't. There's no point in that.
Yeah, one thing people ask me about hand catching a hand light, like if you're gonna do it, go out and practice when there's no wind and it's a perfect day and you can have lots of space around you to just mess around with it, because there is a certain level of skill to doing it, and I don't recommend you like go out on a kayak or a boat and try it for the first time. It's not going to end well, probably.
Yeah, no, and landing in general, like I said, it's just throw it in normal mode, land it like a Mavic, you're fine. I was surprised to see people actually talking about landing. I was like, how come some people are having issues landing? I'm like, once it's in normal mode, it's just hovering. So just hold it down. Like, I don't know. And then I realized that people are like, oh, I'm flying in. They're flying in manual, and then they come back in try to land it, and I'm like, oh, okay, that makes sense.
Yeah,
like
and that was one reason I said that in my video. I was like, don't land in manual. Just come back, hit the pause button, or flip it in normal, and land like a normal Mavic, because landing one of these is like, it's a controlled crash every time. Yeah. I mean, you can get really good at it, but it's still kind of a controlled crash. Whereas this is like, no, it's got the whole sensing, everything, and it'll do the whole Mavic thing. So on the, I'm curious what your thoughts, and a couple of people have asked, the camera quality, especially compared to, GoPro, which is kind of probably the normal thing most people stick on these. What are your thoughts on that?
I mean, for what it does and what it can do, I didn't expect anything that's like gonna blow my mind. I mean, from what I see from it, I mean, it is more than enough that most people would even notice anything, right? I think the camera quality is fine. It's actually really good that they also added in a flat color profile. I think if they didn't do that, then I think a lot of people would be kind of upset, because it's like, well, it's a Cinecam.
Yeah, they
couldn't even give us like a decent like, and they did. So when it comes down to camera too, I think that's like the second part. And the first part is how good of a shot, how smooth of the shot it was. Yeah. And how cinematic the shot was, not the quality of the camera at that point, because you can kind of overlook most of that stuff if it's a breathtaking shot.
Right.
Your niche of people that are watching it in 4K are still super small. So and you're not going to really notice it unless you put it side by side to something else. Right. I think that's what people don't get. It's like, if you look at it side by side, then you can be like, okay, I can see maybe it's a little bit different. But by itself, I mean, the shots you did, I'm watching it on my 4K TV. Looks National Geographic to me. I mean, I don't see any problem with that,
And that's what people do. I mean, and I still do too. Like, you get hung up on the specs and like how it compares to something else. And in the end, like, if your subject matter or the shot is, like you're saying, really breathtaking or really different and unique, and it really grabs people's attention, nobody's going to sit there and go, wait, what camera was that? That wasn't a very good camera. It just is like, no, it's cool, and that it stands on its own. I think, I don't know, when they first launched the Osmo Action, which to me is kind of similar to what this is, in a way, there were a lot of issues with it. The rock steady, the audio sync after it started a new file and stuff like that. And within a really short time period, they pushed out some updates that fixed pretty much all of that. And I have a feeling they're going to do the same thing with this, which as they start getting feedback from more and more people getting this, and as they see more and more stuff posted on YouTube and social media with comments about it, that's one thing I have to say. They have been really good in the past historically of hearing feedback from the users and then really actively working to fix that and push it out through firmware updates. The same thing with the version 1 of this, like the whole analog in, there was a huge amount of delay. It was almost unflyable, and they fixed that in a relatively short period of time, and they've continued to improve it and make things better. So I think they're going to do this. I mean, I'm sure they're going to do the same thing with this, where they'll improve the flight characteristics. They'll improve the camera, whatever the camera is. I mean, it's limited to its specs, but I think they'll improve the rock steady, and they'll maybe improve some of the other visuals of it too.
I'm sure they'll probably have to in general because I think most FPV pilots are so used to flying and then running it through like real steady, and then you can have it really smooth. This one I think is definitely close to getting there, but I think that extra process sometimes I think can make that difference on how smooth it can be. But I mean,
Yeah.
it could be a firm, over time. We always talk about that, right? A lot of stuff. You like the Osmo Action, same thing. I mean, they had major issues, and then a couple firmwares later, it's like, ooh, this is not bad,
Yeah.
So,
And I mean, the Osmo Action is still more reliable than
yeah,
my GoPro Hero 8s and my GoPro Hero 9. The GoPro
I
Hero
know
9 it drives me
it
insane.
freezes on me all the time.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And the touchscreen is
Yeah,
it's so hard to use. So that I think that, overall, DJI has really done an incredible job of putting together a first version of an FPV sort of GPS crossover FPV drone
yeah,
that is really going to bring a lot more people into FPV
yeah.
without so much of the risk or the learning curve of having to jump into it and figure out all the stuff you don't know as you're
Yeah, and
going.
if you've seen and I'm not a skilled, manual pilot at all, but I mean the fact that you can see somebody, I mean, you watch like someone like Nurk or some of those guys and how they're able to take this thing and whip that thing around. I mean, it just at least it shows you the fact that, I mean, if you have the skills, you could do it, right?
Oh yeah.
It doesn't matter what drone you have at that point. It's just muscle memory. So, I mean, seeing him do that stuff, you're just like, okay, holy cow, it's possible, right? It's enough to get to that point, which is that's all skill at that point. But nice to know that it can do it, right?
Yeah.
It's not like they're limiting too many things on that extreme side that you say, oh, well, I can't do a roll. I can't, no, I mean, it could pretty much do, the characteristics might be not like your smaller ones, but I mean, the fact that it can do it, oh man, that's awesome.
Yeah. And I think, and that's the thing, like I only have one battery. So at the very end of the day, I was like, okay, I got to go up and do a flip and a loop and a roll and just make sure. And so I did. It was like, okay, it does do it. And you have to add more throttle to power out and to recover and stuff. But it totally can do it. And I think,
I think once you adjust your rates and once you adjust it to how you like it, and like I didn't even know what that was when I was playing with it, right? Until I was like, okay, I started making these adjustments. I'm like, oh, it recovers a lot slower now. If it comes, and I'm like, all right, you start to like adjust it. I mean, it's out of the box, of course, it's just going to be some sort of default. It's not going to cater to everyone's flight, needs. So I mean, it's like anything else. You just play with it and adjust. And I mean, it's almost like you buy a Mavic, like I want my gimbal to go up nice and slow, because I want to get that, that reveal. So, I mean, you have to play with the settings to get it to your liking. And if if it's not there, of course it's frustrating, but it wasn't the settings that you like. So you just have to play with it.
Right. Yeah. And that's what, now that I've got some more batteries and as soon as I get some sunshine again,
yeah,
that's the next thing. Because I want to be able to go through, especially when I do a little more in-depth deep dive about changing the settings and what they will do. So hopefully people can not be put off at first by it being a little too twitchy. Because if somebody wants to do more of the cinematic stuff, they need to slow it down and they need to have it be a little less responsive.
Right.
So
I think Mike from Drone Supremacy, if you guys aren't following him, he just put one out too. That's a good one. He shot with it, and if you watch his video too, his first flight. He's just like, okay, kind of like most people, like he's an FPV pilot. So I mean he's been flying for a little while, so he has an expectation and has like a way of it to fly that he wants it to, expect it to. So his first flight, I don't think he changed anything, and then his second flight, then he posted up these cinematic shots, and I'm like, dude, sick, and he's like, yeah, you just, he tuned it to the way he likes it. And I don't know, I'm assuming, it seemed like he's enjoying it from what I'm seeing from his second flight, because he got some really, great shots. And I'm just like, man, I mean, just a stark contrast. I mean, he's an FPV pilot and he gets it for the first time, definitely some things you're just not used to it. And then the second, third, fourth flight is like, okay, this could be fun, right?
Yeah.
You know, and it's easy to get up in the air and you just plug and play, and it's like none of the hassle. But of course, if you crash it, you're out of luck, you know. But the fact that you can just like get it up in the air like in 5 minutes, you know, worry free, just like a Mavic. It's like that's what I liked, right? You know, it's like, okay,
yeah,
I don't have to deal with anything.
Yeah, for sure. And that is one of the things I like about it a lot is like, okay, I don't have to think about, you know, did I fix that or did I adjust this and tweak all that stuff to make sure everything's working. It's even the batteries, you know, charged, not charged.
I just plug them in, and then I'm like 3 hours later, I'm like, okay, I think they're done. Yeah, they're done. You know, like, you know, you plug them in like it's a Mavic battery. You're not sitting here. I'm not sitting here watching them. Like, you know, it feels just like another Mavic, right? And that's what's great about it.
Exactly, and that's what I'm excited about. So I know you said you had to go. You probably like me, got kids running around the house.
I got like 5 minutes, I think, 5 or 6 minutes if that works with you.
Right. Yeah, that works for me. It's yeah, I think I mean, to me, I'm really excited about this. I think what it's going to do for FPV as a whole, and what it's going to enable people to do. Because if you look now, you see more and more FPV shots are being involved in commercials, especially like car commercials and stuff like that. But then if you watched, what was it? It was one of the Red Bull snowboarding things that they did a couple weeks ago from somewhere in Utah, I think, that basically their A camera was a big FPV drone with a specialized camera gimbal on it, and they were chasing snowboarders down the hill. Yeah. And that was the shot they used for 90% of the stuff. I was like, well, FPV has gone from kind of this little niche market to
every really drone
enter into the mainstream stuff, just like drones did probably, what would you say, like 5, 6, 7 years ago, maybe, you know, it was like you would see a drone shot and be like, oh man, that's cool. And now drones are more commonplace, where I think FPV has just hit that point where it's going to drop into, and having something like this that will, in somewhat of a safe way, teach people the skill set to be able to fly that way.
Eventually.
Eventually. And that's what, so your advice, coming from somebody who didn't fly a ton of FPV before, what would your advice be to people that, you know, they want to buy this and jump into flying FPV? What sort of like steps would you tell them to go through to get there? Yeah, without risking crashing their drone into a concrete surface and seeing parts of it everywhere.
Yeah, I know. No, I think what the biggest thing is take it for what it's for, especially start in the normal mode, right? If you haven't, you know, if you've flown a Mavic before, basically, and you fly this thing, start in normal mode, and then you just understand getting used to goggles is already like a day-night difference. I think that's what people don't get. It's like, oh, I'm going to jump straight into it. But then if you don't experience goggles, then you're trying to do too many things at once, right? Yeah. So if you already have goggle experience, then of course you could probably just move faster through the steps. But I mean, it has normal mode, then it has sport mode, which is just turn off the sensors and it goes faster. But you still have to understand how to fly it with goggles, right? The whole goggles thing is, for me, was the biggest change from looking at a screen to using goggles. Is a big difference. And then the biggest tip I would say, for once you get to the point of you want to do manual in the biggest open area you possibly can, and fly as fly 200 feet up in the air. Yeah. And do it there, because do not even try to attempt to do manual flying 50, 20 feet up in the air, because you're automatically gonna crash it. So throw it way up there. That way, if it does, you know, if you end up diving and you're like, I have no way to recover it, at least you're giving yourself a good 100, 200 feet to figure that out and hit that emergency button, right? But if you're doing it 20 feet, 30, 50 feet up in the air, it's going to hit. So yeah, when I first hit manual, I brought it up about 100 feet, just because once you switch to the manual, it starts to float on you, right? Yeah. You feel it. It just goes, right? So you're floating now. You're in control. But people have never done it, are like, what is happening? You know, it's like old school days when like you lose GPS and your drone goes into attitude mode, and you're like, whoa, where is it going? Why, you know, it was like that. You know, so if you don't know that feeling, it's that feeling. but you have more control. It's just when you hit manual and you do that safety switch, it all of a sudden just starts going, and then and you're looking at it through the goggles, and you're like, what's happening, right? And then you have to figure, understand how to control it. So do it really high up in the air, and then that gives you time to adjust or bail. In a sense, or I'm not bail, but like hit the emergency, and it'll just sit there and hover. So don't try to go manual mode 50 feet up in the air, because that's a guaranteed loss.
Yeah,
if you've never flown manual before.
Yeah, and especially if you for me, like I've always pinched anyway, but when I started doing it, I was like, okay, one finger's on the pause button, so if anything happens, I just gotta tap it real fast, and that's what I would highly recommend. Familiarize yourself with the pause button, because it works insanely well. It's
scary.
It is. It's like the drone just hits a tripod and locks immediately. It's so fast.
I mean, this thing goes like from sport or manual, it'll straight just turn.
Yep.
Straight up and down to slow down, and then whoop, and then hover. You're just like, wow. It straight Top Guns it, like hit the brakes and flies, and it'll fly right by. That's exactly what it did. It's scary to see.
Yeah, it's amazing, and it'll do it from any attitude. Like you can be upside down halfway through a loop or a roll, and if you push that pause button, it flips over and stops immediately.
That's why when I crashed, I didn't even know I crashed, which was funny, because when I hit, right, if you watch the video, I rolled and then it hit the ground, but then when it was on its way down, I hit the emergency. So I didn't know, but when it tapped, it came back up and it was like this, and I'm like, wait, I don't think I crashed. Wait, did I crash? I don't know if I crashed or not. And then I brought it back, and I'm like, okay, it's all dirty. And I'm like,
right.
It hit, but I'm like, it hit, but it still flew. I'm like, I was so confused. And my video, I'm sitting here, I'm like, did I crash? I did crash it. I'm like looking at it, I'm like, and you see the arm like crack. I'm like, oh, I did, but because I'm like, why was it flying? It was like, it was hovering after the crash. I was like, oh, this is weird. So I just tapped it, I kind of just, and it went back up. So that was interesting.
That's pretty awesome. I've ever seen that, but I guess I didn't put two and two together that you actually that you had hit the pause button and tapped it, and it popped back up. I don't know why. That's pretty impressive.
Yeah, it's fun. I mean, I love everyone's perspectives are so good. Everyone's got great videos on it, and like I said, everyone's just coming from a different angle. So I think it's just a matter. You just have to put it in your hands and fly it. It's so hard to explain to somebody, right? Until you do it, and that's the reason why it's like everyone's got great opinions on it, but they're strong opinions because they're coming from different places, right? I'm gonna have a stronger opinion when it comes to a photography drone than an FPV pilot would care for a photography drone, right? I'm gonna have a different a perspective and look and expectation out of it, right? So then that's what's happening here. It's like you have a lot of FPV pilots that are passionate about what they do, which is amazing, and I think it's just once you get used to it, and I think you find a place in the bag, just like you find different cameras in your bag, there's a place for it, and I think that's what people just need to realize, that part of it at least.
So I've seen the question a few times, and this will be the last question I ask. Would you recommend this as a first drone, or would you recommend this as an additional drone? Like, would you still recommend a Mini 2, Air 2, Mavic 2 Pro as somebody's first drone?
Oh, first drone. No, I mean, well, that's the biggest question is, what do you expect out of the drone?
Yeah.
Right? So if that's your first drone and you're just like, oh no, I just wanted to take great photos and video and then maybe to bring it on my family trips, absolutely not. probably not. It's just overkill, right?
Yeah.
If you throw down $400, throw it in your backpack, get a Mini and see how that feels.
Yeah.
Right? Because let's be honest, I know so many people that buy drones and it's great, but they have 5 or 10 flights and that thing's on their bookshelf.
Right.
I think this is definitely a drone that you don't. You kind of know what you're getting into, right?
Yeah.
It's not a first fun drone that you're just going to be like, I want to bring it on my family trips. No way.
Yeah.
So
that's what I think. This is definitely a second drone built more for fun and enjoyment than it is for work.
Yeah. But has the capability to do work, right? If you're skilled with it. I mean, like I said, the shots you're getting, I mean, that can easily be in any, any stuff. And that was your first one battery flight. I just can't imagine how it's going to be after you go up there with 3 batteries, fine tune it. I mean,
yeah. That's what I'm looking forward to. Now that I've had a little time on it, and I'll get the tune tweaked out a little bit more to it the way I like it, because I was fighting some wind, and so it was making things a little twitchy because I was just using the default rates and stuff. I'm really excited about it. So when you come to Alaska, we'll go out and do some awesome stuff. It'll be fantastic. So, man, Aldrin, thank you so much for being here. I dropped a link to your channel earlier. I'll drop it again. But thanks for being here, and really appreciate it.
No, thanks for having me on. And sorry, guys, I wasn't replying back to stuff on here on the comments. I don't know where my comment thing is even showing up. But yeah, what's up to everybody? Jake, thanks again for having me. Anytime, man. This was fun. I'll definitely have to get some live streams up on my channel as well so that you can jump on there. But yeah, thanks again.
Sounds good. Anytime. Have a great night. And yeah, hopefully it doesn't hail on you too much longer.
I think it's all done. Thanks, Jake. Thanks, everyone. Take care.
All right. See you, Aldrin. All right. So yeah, that was pretty awesome. I really appreciate Aldrin being willing to jump on the stream like that. And yeah, hopefully when he comes to Alaska, I can't wait. I've got some places I'd love to take him. So anyway, now I do want to answer some of the questions in the chat, because I've seen a lot of them go by, and I think we answered a few, but I think Aldrin's answer on, like, if this is your first drone, or if you're just doing it purely for fun, then this would be a good first drone. But if you want to do photos, video stuff, or anything else that capture your vacations or stuff for YouTube stuff, I would go with a Mini 2 or an Air 2. And interestingly enough, the Mini 2 actually is a really fantastic drone. I've used it in commercial work a few times, and nobody's ever complained about the quality of it. And it has flown really, really well. So, but as a fun drone, as a play drone, and as a working drone, if you want to do that kind of, fast motion cinematic flight type footage, then this drone is a good solution overall, especially once you kind of get it locked into the way you want the drone to feel and the way you want it to respond. So Paul, I make everyone want to go to Alaska. Yeah, I know. Monster Gaming, is the Mavic Air 2 good? The Mavic Air 2 is a great drone. The only reason I didn't keep it was it didn't have 10-bit color. And there were a couple of jobs that I, usually a couple times a year, that I have to have a drone with 10-bit color, because I'm handing it off to somebody who's going to do heavy color grading. They're going to match it up to other cameras they have. And 10-bit color is much more, much easier to work with when you're doing heavy color grading. If you don't do heavy color grading, and you're not trying to match it up to other maybe higher end cinema cameras or stuff like that, then 10-bit color is not a big deal. You can use a Mavic Air 2 or a Mini 2 just fine. So, but the Air 2 is a great drone. I'd have a hard time recommending the Mavic 2 Pro, just because it's getting toward the end of its life cycle. I think that we'll see a new one here in the next few months. And so, yeah, anyway. Let's see. Are you crazy? Are the sticks inverted in manual mode? Specifically goes up, down, goes up, simulator manual mode. They can be. Sometimes the simulator is inverted, and I don't know why that is, but on this, at least in mode 2, like, this is your throttle up and down, and everything else is the way it normally is for me on all of the other FPV drones I fly. So, see you later, Paul. I know you got to go and get ready. Yeah. And as far as mine using StreamYard, I don't know if I'll regularly use StreamYard. I just did it tonight because it was easier for Aldrin and I to be able to, for me to be able to get Aldrin on the stream. And so, yeah. Lawn, my dimples. Oh. Oh, good luck, Alaska Filmer. It's it's really coming down outside. I was like, wow. Okay. No worries. Let's see. If I haven't answered a question, I'm going to go for a little bit longer because we got a little bit late start. But if I haven't answered a question, please ask it in the chat. And it doesn't have to be drone related. It can be other camera related stuff like that. I would love to answer questions if I can and help you guys out. So see you, River City, Brad Alston. Have a good one. Let's see, Rex Ramos. Do I recommend? Oh, do I have recommended advanced settings for the Mavic Air 2 cinematic shots for the gimbal settings? So Rex, I always slow the gimbal down to. It depends on the job, but generally my gimbal for any drones that I'm working with like that is between 10 and 15 for speed, and then the brake I have. Oh man, I have to remember what the brake. I set the brake. I don't have it at 0, but I don't have it super long either. I think it's like 5 to 8 usually, if I remember right. But that's generally where my stuff sits. I mean, honestly, usually it's between 12 and 15 is where my gimbal sits. For most jobs, it's like it's at 15, and then for some things, I'll slow it down to 12 or 11, maybe 10, depending on the type of stuff I'm trying to shoot. So. Let's see. Mark H. Was that my wife spotting for me with the FPV drone? No, that was a friend of mine. And she hiked out there with me. We every now and then, if we've got time, she'll go on hikes with me. She's a pretty avid hiker. And yeah, so every now and then I'll put it out there to people I know up here going, hey, I'm going out here. Does anybody want to come? And sometimes a few people will say yes. So Marcus Tank asks if it's okay to strap the battery onto the goggles, or is it not recommended? It's totally okay, Marcus. I usually fly mine with a LiPo battery, and this is a fat strap because I don't like the over the head strap, but it has a little loop back here that you can strap the thing into, and I prefer it that way just because I don't like to have a lot of things hanging off of me. I like to kind of have it all be self-contained when I'm flying. So yeah, but it's perfectly fine, especially this battery, because this is not a LiPo battery. This is a lithium ion battery, and lithium ion are a fair amount more stable than lithium polymer batteries are, or LiPo batteries are. So Ryan Black. Yes, Ryan, that was Portage. That was Portage Glacier area, which is a hike I try and do fairly. I mean, I do fairly often, or I kayak in the summer because it's nice. It's a beautiful spot. There's lots of places to go see and explore, and yeah. So if you're going to go there, though, be careful, especially now because the lake's frozen. That's not the issue. Tons of people will go right up to the ice, and all of that ice. I wish I had. Oh, maybe I can. Oh no, I don't have it on here. But all of that ice that you see across the front of the glacier there that I was flying across is all actively falling into the lake. And so it's extremely dangerous to be close to the ice there. You've got to be a ways away from it to be safe. So, yeah. Ryan, definitely follow me on Instagram because that's usually I'll post it on one of my stories there. And I'll just kind of say, hey, I'm going out somewhere. Does anybody want to come? So post it there. Aviation fan, do I think it's worth upgrading from a DJI Mini 2 to DJI FPV? I don't think it's an upgrade. I think that would be a cross grade. But I wouldn't get rid of a Mini 2 for this because they're very different in what they do. You can't do the same type of footage as the Mini 2 as a GPS stabilized drone, especially when you're doing like orbits, stuff like that. You can't get that same sort of stabilized footage with this. This is really meant more for one. DJI wasn't lying when they said experiencing the joy of flight, because that's exactly what you do when you have this and the goggles. It's so much fun to fly. But the other thing it's really built for is getting that really high energy, engaging shots of flying through or close to stuff. And so, yeah. Moshi, you're asking, I'm sure Aldrin will answer too, but if you're the Mini over the Mini 2, if you can get the Mini 2, I would get the Mini 2 because it has much better image quality and much better motors for handling more wind. So yeah, if you can get the Mini 2, definitely get the Mini 2. Monster Gaming, any advice for a first time flying a drone? Go out into a big open field where there's nothing around. Like the bigger the field, the better. And then start off slow and just slowly, gingerly build up your muscle memory. And that's what I said even about this same thing. Like go to a big open area and start off slow and just, you want to build your muscle memory to where you're not having to think about what control inputs make the drone do what. So that's what I always recommend to people. Like go to a big open field, as big as you can get, go stand in the middle of it and just gently, slowly start flying the drone and get the feel of it and build the muscle memory. Let's see. Yeah, Aldrin agrees with me. Mini 2. Yes, that's true, Ethan. The Mini 2 has OcuSync, much, much better and much stronger control link than normal. Mark H, I am low res. It's because I'm using StreamYard. It's limited to 720p. Normally I'm doing this in 1080, but yeah. So it's limited to 720p because I didn't want to sign up for the $40 a month streaming plan. Because anyway, so hey, Ben Lockwood. If I have an FPV drone that I would want to sell, like a Beta Shark or anything, I do not right now, Ben. I build almost all my drones. I build in pairs, and that's because if something happens to one, I have another one that I can immediately plug in and keep going. So when I'm working with other clients, they're not waiting on me, or if I'm working with a production crew, they're not waiting on me to like go fix my drone. So yeah, I don't have anything that I could sell at the moment. Sorry. It's aviation plan or aviation fan. I mentioned doing orbits and things like that. What kind of shots do I recommend doing on a Mini 2? So for the Mini 2, I recommend a lot of the classic kind of GPS drone shots where you're like flying forward and tilting the gimbal up as you go, or the crane shots where you tilt the gimbal down as you pull up and away, or do it the other way as you come down to something. Orbiting around things is always great. You can do that with the smart modes on the Mini, and the Droney is another good one. It's just those types of shots really do well to establish your character or your subject in a location and show off the location and keep it interesting because more information is being revealed to your audience all the time. So in that, I am getting close to finishing my drone class course thing that I'll be releasing here in the next few weeks, hopefully, ideally toward the end of this month. We'll see. And that'll go through a lot of that stuff, like different types of shots, what kind of shots you would want to use. Yeah. Ben Lockwood. So the nice thing about this is that you can, like, you start out in the normal mode, get the feeling of it, go to the sport mode, get the feeling of it, and then you can go to the manual mode, but not engage and I'll be doing a video, like the whole walkthrough of this thing, but not engage the like ability to do complete rolls and flips and get used to it that way, and then progress. And you can do the simulator on your phone, which is really, really great. Brian Peterson. Yes, I know. Hey, Tommy Calloway. Anyway, so this people keep going like, this is not a good FPV drone. It's not the same as an FPV drone. Like, and people are saying it's super expensive, and it's really not. When you figure that if you're going to go get into FPV, this is going to cost you $500-ish, a few $100 for a GoPro, a few $100, at least $400 or $500 for a decent set of goggles. And the DJI ones are great. And then a couple $100 for a controller. You're in it pretty much for the same amount of money. I would recommend that you get Care Refresh if you're gonna, want to do acro stuff. But yeah, it's a good drone. very different anyway. So, but I don't think it should be your first drone if you're wanting to do photos and videos. That this drone does not do. Well, it does do photos, but not the same. I wouldn't do this. This is not a photo drone. Like if you want to do photos and videos and kind of the normal commercial type work with a drone, or filming yourself for social media and stuff, then you're not gonna. This is not it. That you want a Mini 2 or an Air 2, something like that. Scott Beeman, yeah, it's a bummer. Although a few of them are growing, just not usually the ones that I go to. So. Skater Gator, I think I just answered that in that you're going to be pretty close to the same price to get a decent FPV drone and go from there. So, I mean, I think so. The only downside is that you're limited on what you can do to it as far as, modifications, programming, stuff like that, which is actually not a bad thing. But for what you get in the package, you are actually getting a pretty good deal. So not yet, Rex. I hope that's something that DJI implements in a future firmware update, because I would like to be able to see the histogram. But really, the auto modes on this do a pretty good job. And if you put ND filters on there, like I'm using ND filters from Freewell, they're great. I bought them because they didn't send me any. I think I actually got an email today about sending me the ND filters. I was like, I kind of already got some, so thank you. But, no thanks. So maybe I'll see if they'll send me some and I'll do a giveaway or something like that. But the auto mode on this actually it works pretty well. Everything you saw was shot on auto mode in my video. So it's not terrible. It does a decent job. Cyberhawk. So it shot in auto, and then the only thing that I did was adjust the exposure a bit in post. So I it kind of kept it a ways away from clipping highlights, and so I pushed it up to where the highlights were, right on the edge of being clipped, and then I think I had to drop the shadows down. Well, no, I didn't drop the shadows. It was mostly just the highlights. And so just adding a little bit more of that, and that's all I did. And it turned out pretty good, except for the stuff that I did shoot in D-Cine, like just so that I could have an example for that. Yeah. Without a controller, Ben, the simulator is very difficult. So, yeah. Smaxum, you picked up a Mini 2 on Saturday. It's great. Mini 2s are great. It is a fantastic little drone. So, hey, Evan, turn in. Let's see. You're looking at this drone because you don't want super acro moves, but you want faster movements and more motion than you would get with your Mavic Mini. Would I recommend it? If you're strictly doing like video stuff, then sure. But honestly, the Mavic Mini, the Mini 2 at least, like if you've seen my review of the Mini 2, no, not the review of the Mini 2. It's the comparison of the Mini 2 versus the Air 2. Then that gives you an idea. Like the Mini 2 will flat out move. Like it'll do 30 something miles an hour. And because it's so small, you can thread it through things. So one of those things I did on mine was I was going backwards and my friend and I are walking down through the old mine buildings, and I shot through a pavilion. So you can do stuff like that with the Mini 2. You just don't get the like banking, turning sort of feel. But yeah. Yeah, Garrett, if you go into sport mode, you get like 40 something miles an hour, which is fast. Like you don't think it's fast because the drone will do, 80 something, but it's fast, very, very fast in sport mode. Fast enough to really make you have to work to not crash. So, Will Graham, I'm coming from Aspire 2, Mavic Pro flying, got the DJI FPV today. What degree angle should you use, Will? So if you're gonna, start in normal mode and get a good feeling for that, and then move to sport mode and then get a good feeling for that. And then when you decide you're ready to jump into full manual mode, you have to go through the goggles and change it so that you actually can go into full manual mode. Otherwise, you're just going into sport mode still. I would set the camera angle at 10 degrees first, fly with it at 10 degrees, and then move up to 20 and fly with it at 20. And then anytime you're landing, put it back in normal mode and land like a normal GPS drone, because it lands much better in normal mode. Yeah. Rex, if you have the Mavic Air 2, just stick with that. That's a great drone. Stick with the Mavic Air 2. There's no real reason for you to get the Mini 2 over the Mavic Air 2. Absolutely not. The only reason I got the Mini 2 after I'd sold the Mavic Air 2, because the Mavic Air 2 is not that much bigger than the Mini 2, was I wanted the smallest, most compact form factor I could have to throw in my backpack and take with me places. And the Mini 2 is it. So, yeah. Let's see. Close-up pictures and landscape pictures. Oh, and Audrey, I really like the Tamron 28-200 for stuff like that. It's a good all-around lens. I would look at that one. So if you're on a full frame Sony camera, if you're not, let me know, Audrey. Man, I'm going to go for a couple more minutes here, and then I'm going to have to wrap it up because I've got another appointment I have to run to. So let's see. Mark H, Mavic 2 Pro question. You've had issues with shaking in colder weather, although it seems to recover and stabilize. Try different props. Wondering ever kind of that issue. Was the drone actually shaking? Like you could see the body of the drone shaking, or was it just the gimbal? Because I've noticed with mine that the little rubber vibration dampers for the gimbal get cold, and then it gets vibration in the footage because they're too cold, especially when I'm flying around 0 and colder. It really has an issue with that. And I don't know if it's because my dampers are old. They're like 2 years old now. Maybe that's part of it. They just got stiffer over time, but if the actual drone is shaking, that's an IMU issue, which usually means the IMU is too cold and you got to let it warm up for a bit. At least that's been my experience. So, oh, that's good. I'm glad your gimbal works great. Cyberhawk, is the DJI will attract a lot of attention from onlookers? Is it very loud? So it's not that loud. Like this is a pretty quiet drone, but that's because I use pretty low pitch props on it. This is not much louder than that. It's a little louder than like a Mavic Air 2 Mini. It's a little bit louder than the Mini 2 for sure. I would put it on par with the Mavic 2 Pro, but the deal is the harder you fly it, the more aggressive you fly it, the louder it gets. So some of that depends on how hard, how loud, how hard you're pushing it. If you're being super gentle, it's not super loud. I mean, it's loud. It sounds like a drone, like the Mavic 2 Pro, but a little bit higher pitch. Like I think it's probably as loud as the original Mavic Air. If you've ever heard that, it's in that range there. So yeah. All right, folks. I want to thank Aldrin again. I don't think he's on the stream anymore. He was in the chat earlier, but thank Aldrin Asasio again for being on here. Flight Path. Here is his channel. If you don't know who he is, I can't imagine that any of you don't know who he is. But if you don't know who he is, you should go check him out. He has lots of great content out there. Great guy. Also released a really cool little case pouch for the Mini 2, which is really nice, really cool little carrying case. So if you know, looking for something to carry your drone around in, that would be a great place to start. I think he sold out the first order and he's got to start it on a second one. But so I will be here same time, same place next week. There's a couple videos in the works for in between there and now. And yeah, in the meantime, everybody stay safe, be good, and I'll see you again soon in the next video. And since I don't have my outro ready to go, I guess I will have to do something else. So cheers, everybody. We'll see you again soon.